What is happening, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Pit Stop Lounge. This is episode number 4, where today I will be giving you my thoughts on the Bahrain Grand Prix that took place last Saturday, the season of this year's Formula One season, which is set to be the longest in the history of the sport with 24 races. Now, a couple of things before we begin today's episode, guys. The first is that Malcolm is gonna have to sit this one out again. He will be back for the next episode, which we will be talking about the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix in Jeddah. The second is that this episode was scheduled to be released between Sunday and Monday, but unfortunately, those 2 days, I got sick, had a cold. I'm still recovering from this cold, so bear with me for this, guys. Right now, it's the season of the common colds, guys. So apologies for the delay, but I will try my best to soldier on for this episode as well. Also, yesterday I got invited by my buddies Andrea and Franco to the Adler podcast. Basically, this podcast is about movies, video games, and other news that is related to movies, guys. So make sure to follow them on their Facebook and also on their Instagram account. We'll be putting a bio. I'll put in the links in the episode's bio. Make sure to give give them a follow and a share as well. And obviously, last thing, make sure to give us a follow, share, and even a like on our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube accounts for our Spotify listeners. Make sure to give us a follow and hit us up with a rating. It would mean the world to us to hear your thoughts on this podcast and also on the episodes. All right, guys, let's get into today's episode, which we will be mostly talking about the Bahrain Grand Prix, and also towards the end, I will be giving you my thoughts on Drive to Survive, as I finally finished the sixth season. But that will be the final thing that I will be talking about for today. Let's get into the Bahrain Grand Prix, guys. The season opener of this year's Formula One season. A night race happening at 4 p.m. Maltese time in my country, which unfortunately there's not a lot to talk about, because unfortunately the race we had, we all hoped that it would be a much closer race than last season's, and even the whole of the whole of the championship last season. But it wasn't meant to be. But it wasn't all that. It wasn't all like that throughout the entire weekend, because, funnily enough, the weekend actually started quite surprising, quite not in the way that everyone thought it was going to be like, because in each of the 3 practices we had 3 different drivers who got into the top 5 positions. When it came to the first practice, of all drivers, it was Danny Ricciardo who got the fastest time, and was followed by the 2 McLarens of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri in second and third. Now, guys, it needs to be said that the first few drivers, the top 3 drivers, and also the ones who finished 4th and 5th, were actually on the soft compound tires, and the rest of the field were on the mediums. And since it was practice 1, it was of the utmost importance to not get too carried away with what we're seeing, basically. So Ricardo got the fastest time. Mercedes. So when it came to free practice 2, it was quite surprising, because it was Mercedes who came out on top, and they not only eclipsed both Red Bull and Ferrari with quite ease, but they got first and second with Hamilton and Russell. Obviously, soft tires with fresh rubber as well. So that, for a team like them that really needed to step on the right foot, that was a really nice way to start things going for the season. But unfortunately, that didn't quite lasted. That didn't lasted that long, to be honest. So the Mercedes came out on top. It came to the second free practice. And in the third free practice, it was Carlos Sainz who came out on top of all practice. Which we then went to qualifying on Friday afternoon, a few hours right after practice 3, which basically this gave us a bit of an indication of how the weekend was going to end, how the weekend was going to be shaped. In the first round of qualifying, Carlos Sainz continued his pace from free practice 3, setting up an early pace of a 1 minute and 29.9 seconds, followed by Lance Stroll, a bit of a surprise there, who just was only 0.0556 seconds behind, which isn't quite, which the margins were very minimal there. Sainz actually didn't run again for the rest of the session as well, and that basically he came out on top with regards to qualifying 1. Those who didn't make the first part of qualifying, it wasn't Haas, because everyone thought it was going to be Haas that were going to end up at the back of the grid. However, it wasn't them, because both Haas's made it to the second round of qualifying, and taking their place was Alpine, and for Alpine, that was the start of an atrocious weekend for them. We will get to the rankings very later on, and we'll be talking about Alpine quite later on there. But Alpine at the back of the grid. I mean, Gasly and Ocon. I mean, we all knew they were going to have a bit of a difficult start to the season, but not at the back of the grid, which it's quite alarming for them. So Gasly finishing 20th, and Ocon, followed by Ocon in 19th. Logan Sargent 18th, no surprises there. Not the best way to start your second season in Formula One, and he'll hope that he'll have better qualifying rounds than the one we had in Bahrain. And the two Saubers basically completed the losers of the first qualifying phase, with Zhou Guanyu in 17th and Bottas in 16th. Again, no surprises there. Didn't quite expected both Saubers to get into the second round of qualifying, so they finished in 17th and 16th respectively. Moving on to the second round of qualifying, which was more of the same again, happening as well. Ferrari coming out on top again, but only this time it was Leclerc, coming out with a 1 minute 29.165 seconds, 2/10 up to Verstappen, who was in second, and Carlos Sainz having another strong qualifying round, getting a third place finish, just 4/10 off the pace, followed by Hamilton in fourth and Alonso in fifth, basically repeating, having that bit of those similar vibes that we had in last season. McLaren finished up the top 10 with Piastri and Norris, Perez in 8th, Russell and Nico Hülkenberg in 6th, and making it to the third round of qualifying. And that for me was one of the biggest surprises of the entire weekend. I mean, we all thought that Haas were going to end up straight away knocked out for Q1. I myself predicted that they were going to end up in that phase, but they didn't. To get one of their cars into Q3, great start for Ayo Komatsu. Now, Magnussen could only manage 15th, which it's the highest that it is the most that the Haas could have offered for this qualifying round, and also in the weekend as well. Ricciardo on 14th, proving that the first free practice was just a one-off for him. That is more of a reality check for him, getting a 14th place finish. Albon in 13th, no surprises there. The fact that he got out of Q1 was already enough. I think it was a stepping stone for him with this race. Lance Stroll, a bit disappointing for his standards, getting only a 12th place finish, and Yuki Tsunoda finishing up the Q2 eliminators, getting an 11th place finish, with the newly rebranded Red Bull sister team with Racing Bulls. Which brings us to the final round of qualifying, and this is where things started turning into one way, basically, because Verstappen, this is where Verstappen showed his true colors. Now, to be fair with Verstappen, he didn't start the weekend as he should, with both free practices just finishing just outside the top 5. But this was just, I mean, no pun intended, but this was just a practice. This was just a warm-up round for him, because it was clear that he was going to get all his all his pride and soul into qualifying, basically his determination, as we call it as well. So, and that led to a pole position for him with a 1:29.421 seconds, basically just a 0.59 seconds quicker than Leclerc, which for Ferrari was disappointing for them because despite getting the best out of the car with the first 2 rounds of qualifying, also in practice as well, they were unable to repeat that in the 3rd round of qualifying. So Verstappen came out on top with pole position, followed by Charles Leclerc in second with just a 2 to 8 point seconds behind Verstappen. George Russell getting third, quite a big result for him and Mercedes as well. Carlos Sainz managing fourth, considering his pace in practice and qualifying and in the first 2 phases of qualifying, a bit disappointing for him. Was expecting maybe a second place or even a pole position for him, but he could only manage fourth. Perez in fifth, followed by Alonso in sixth. The 2 McLarens, Norris and Piastri in 7th and 8th. Now listen, 7th and 8th for McLaren, it is a bit disappointing, but considering last season where we couldn't even get out of the first round of qualifying, that is a major improvement from last season. So the fact that we got 7th and 8th compared to last season, it's a good result for them. Hamilton only managing 9th, expected far better for him. I thought maybe he was getting like a top 5 finish, but 9th was the only place, was the best he could manage. And Nico Hülkenberg, 10th place. That's for Haas, just to get to the 3rd round of qualifying was enough for them. I wasn't expecting them to get into challenging Red Bull and Ferrari. We all know that Haas car is going to be at the bottom half of the grid. But listen, they surprised me big time this weekend, Haas. The fact that they got into Q3, no one predicted them. No one predicted that they were going to end up in Q3, and it's a great start for their season with regards to the qualifying phase. That brings us that pretty much marks the end of qualifying and brings us to the race. Now listen guys, I'm from Malta, for those who don't know, and in Malta we have a word, it's called processioni, and processioni in English it's translated to procession. Processions, most of the processions are very slow paced. I'm not a big fan of processions, basically, and unfortunately, Formula One, over the years we had many races that are resembled to processions. And unfortunately, it's because of mainly one driver dominating the rest of the field, whether it is Schumacher, whether it was Vettel, Hamilton, and now with Max. Last season we all know it was just a completely one-sided season, complete domination from Red Bull, just winning every single race apart from one. Oh, excuse me about that, guys. Apart from Singapore, of course. And a lot of people, including myself, hoped that this weekend, last Saturday's Grand Prix, could have maybe got us got us some competition, maybe a fresh start to the season. We could have maybe the likes of Ferrari, Mercedes, and even McLaren, to be fair, giving Red Bull a challenge. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case, man. This race, sadly, was very, very uneventful, very boring. If I could give you basically a summary of how this race was planned, I could literally just describe it in just 2 minutes, basically, because if we look at the start, Verstappen basically got the better out of Leclerc. Hülkenberg touched with Stroll, spinning him out and basically putting Stroll at the back of the grid, and Hülkenberg suffering some damage with his front wing. Sauber got a similar issue with there as well. And going back to Max, it was, he got the better out of Leclerc, and from there, it was just no way back from there. Verstappen was literally putting a fast lap after fast lap after fast lap for most of the laps, and he was just unfazed, untroubled for the entirety of the race. This is a common theme that we saw last season, and this race, unfortunately, was a continuation of last season. I mean, Verstappen and even Red Bull making every single driver and their rivals look very, very silly, because I mean, they got the pit stops absolutely spot on. The tires, the strategy of the race, as per usual with Red Bull, nailed on. And Verstappen ended up. I mean, he went on to win the race by over 22 seconds. I mean, last year he won by 11 seconds, and to win this race by the double of last season, it's very, very scary, very, very worrying as well. And I go back to my point of basically Verstappen liking every single component of the car, and that is really, really, really worrying for the rest of the grid, and even for the fans as well. I mean, listen, we don't want to see just one team completely dominating the entire season, but unfortunately, we just, I mean, listen, I know it's only one race, but I'm sensing that this is not going to be I'm sensing that this is going to be featured in a lot of races in this upcoming season. So Verstappen unfazed, untroubled for the entire race. So basically, just summarize the entire thing of how it happened. No retirements as well, which is rare for a Formula One race. We don't have a lot of races where we don't have a single retirement throughout the race. So the main focus of the entire Grand Prix was just in the top five, in the middle portion of the grid, and even in some regards in the back of the grid as well. So what I'm going to do basically is I'm going to basically mention who came out on top and who are the biggest losers of the entire Grand Prix. So basically, what I have is a couple of categories that me and Malcolm that we both discussed over the last couple of weeks and days as well. So the first is driver of the day, pretty self-explanatory, guys. The driver that performed the best out of the bunch. The loser of the day, which we all know who that team. I mean, normally it's a driver, but we all know which team it's gonna be. Which team? The dick of the day. Now, dick of the day is the driver that had the most unsportsmanship, that had the most unsportsmanship behavior of the day. It might be a driver, but also we're talking about also teams as well. The speed demon of the day, the fastest driver on the grid, which I'm just going to say it straight away. It's Max. It's going to be Max Verstappen. Obviously, the fact that he was just completely dominating the entire race from start to finish, that was just the icing on the cake. Straight away, Max is the speed demon of the day. And lastly, the clown of the day. Basically, what this category is basically the driver that got the funniest moment of the entirety of the race. So let's start with driver of the day. Now, driver of the day, guys, this is pretty easy. I mean, as I said, I think it's obviously shoehorned that Max Verstappen is going to take this. The fact that I'm going to repeat myself, of course, on this, but the fact that he won, that he dominated from start to finish, and continuing his trajectory of how he ended last season, continuing that form into the upcoming season, there are no arguments for debate to basically crown him the driver of the day. So for me, there isn't really any cause for debate to basically crown Verstappen's driver of the day. It was a very smooth race. I mean, his weekend wasn't the smoothest, but when it came to the race, he got, I mean, as per usual with Max, as per with his caliber of his drive, as his caliber, he got the race spot on. This is now his 8th consecutive victory, continuing on a ruthless, consistent run of races. And yeah, for me, he is my driver of the day. I mean, if we're gonna mention other drivers, Perez is a shout out. The fact that he started from 5th and basically getting the better out of Ferrari and even George Russell's Mercedes to fight his way from 5th to 2nd. That is a good race for Checo. And for him, it was important to get that 2nd place for him. Now, obviously, he obviously wished that he wanted a race win, but unfortunately, he has Max as his teammate, so that's not going to help. That's not going to help a lot of things for Checo. So for him to get to 5th to 2nd, it was a solid race for him, and it was important for him because this is a make or break season for Checo. Which is going to be one of the merry-go-round driver transfers we're going to see throughout this 2024 season. So to get that 2nd place finish for him, it was important for him to get that 2nd place. Another driver that has to be in this category as well is Carlos Sainz. Sainz had a strong weekend overall. Now, obviously, his first round of practice wasn't the best. Wasn't getting the best out of Leclerc, but his race, he got his tire set up quite spot on, and he got obviously the better out of Leclerc. Which, if we're going to talk about Leclerc, unfortunately, Leclerc had a tough race. He was struggling with brake issues for the entirety, and he never really got the hang of the race from there on in. Sainz, obviously, if we're going to balance who had the better race from the Ferrari drivers, it was obviously Sainz. Sainz had a great race, had a strong race, more that. And Leclerc, his brake issues really pondered his race overall. And one last shout out for this is more for team of the for the surprise of the day. But actually, before we get to surprise of the day, my driver of the day is obviously going to go to Max. Max is going to be my driver of the day. Complete domination from start to finish. Continuing on from continuing his ruthless form from last season. And that is the perfect way to start off to defend your world championship title. And listen, if he continues on with this pace, then a 4th world title is certainly going to be him. But it's going to be his. But listen, there's a long way to go. We're only one race in. We still have 20 races to go for this entire F1 calendar. Anyway, now moving on. For me, the surprise of the day. Now listen, Haas they didn't score any points with the race, but they weren't the worst. They weren't the worst team They weren't the worst of the entire. They weren't the worst team this weekend because which many predicted they would be finishing bottom and even cut adrift from the rest of the pack. Obviously losing Gunther Steiner and Simone Resta as well. It was a solid weekend for them. Now Haas, Madison finished 12th, which obviously no points for them. But this last Saturday's Grand Prix, it showed that this team can be in that category, maybe get a couple of points as well. It was a very encouraging sign for them, for their team, that points is possible for them. Maybe just outside the top 10, but listen, this is only one race. I mean, we've seen this similar. I mean, we've seen the story before with Haas, that they started the season strong, and then as the season progressed, they slipped, they fell under the pecking order, and basically ended up at the bottom of the pack, basically. So. Strong, a solid start for Haas, but we have to see, obviously, with a couple of races coming in, how this will pan out. Now, moving on to the losers, to the losers of the weekend. Now, I have a couple of contenders here. As I mentioned before, Leclerc. Now, listen, Leclerc just signed a new contract. He is the supposed poster boy of Ferrari, and last season was a disappointing one for him. So Charles wanted to. He wanted to recover from last season, and in order to do that, he needed a bit of a strong start to the season. Okay, he needed a bit of a better start to what he to where he left off last season, and unfortunately, as I mentioned just recently, it's a bit of same old for Leclerc, because in qualifying he was setting strong times in his sectors, but when it came to the race, he was suffering from a brake issue, which caused massive lock with his tires, and it forced him to do an early pit stop. And from there, that basically ruled him out from a potential podium place, and it was a very frustrating race for him. Now, listen, not entirely his fault, because that obviously comes down to the setup of the car, but a really, really frustrating race for Charles, and that's not the way to start your season. He finished fourth, and he was close to getting a podium finish by getting third, but Russell just had the better, got the better out of Charles, and George basically got a fourth place finish. George had finished third, and Leclerc finished fourth. For Lewis Hamilton, not a great weekend for him. 9th place in qualifying and only managing 7th in the race, just 2 places higher than his qualifying pace. And that really, really hindered him from having the same pace as Russell, and that doesn't bode well to Mercedes. The Silveros, Toto Wolff and his team wanted both drivers to challenge with Ferrari and Red Bull, but it just happens to be the case. But George Russell was just the only driver to do that, unfortunately. Nico Hülkenberg is another one, Nico Hülkenberg basically turned from hero and qualifying to zero in the race. Basically clipped Lance Stroll, the back of Lance Stroll's Aston Martin at the first turn on the first lap, which caused his front wing, which caused massive damage to his front wing. Cost him, basically ended up having an early pit stop, because obviously front wing damage, you need to do an early pit stop. And that really it was basically race over for him from the start. And considering his pace in qualifying, disappointing for Hülkenberg. Magnussen got the better out of him in the race, finishing 12th. So not a great race for Nico. And basically that was his race overall. But for me, the biggest losers are by far Alpine. The fact that, listen, they knew. Alpine knew that they were going to have a difficult start to the season. However, the fact that they were off the pace throughout the entirety of the race, throughout the entirety of the weekend, it just affected their progress of going through the field. They finished, I believe, in 17th and 18th. The car looks very, very old, very, very. So the vibes I'm getting with Alpine, they're very similar to what we experienced in last season in Bahrain. But the difference is that Alpine not only have a really shit car this year, but there seems to be a lot of, the instability issues are just continuing on from last season, and their weekend was so bad that Alpine had to make changes to their technical team, basically, because on yesterday, Matt Harmon and Dirk De Beer, who Hart, the technical director, and the chief aerodynamicist of the team respectively, they got the sack basically. So more sackings with regards to Alpine, and they basically made a couple of changes straight away. Basically, these changes are going to happen straight from the next Grand Prix, and basically Joe Vernon now will be the technical director when it comes to engineering. David Wheater is now the technical director when it comes to the aerodynamics, and oh fuck, I am going to butcher this name so badly, but Kieron Pilbeam, fuck's sake, I butchered that massively. Is the technical director when it comes to the performance. The power unit of the team is now going to be led by Eric Mainan, another surname I butchered there, who will continue on with the team with the power unit regulations towards 2026. So Alpine had a shocker of a weekend, by far the biggest losers of the entirety of this weekend, and this is going to take a long time. I mean, I'm probably expecting the same outcome with Saudi Arabia. I mean, if they manage, there needs to be a massive miracle for Alpine to have a successful weekend. So yeah, terrible weekend for Alpine, and by far the biggest losers of the grid. I mean, and as we're speaking about Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, those are two unhappy drivers. I mean, they don't look happy at all with the setup of the car this season. And basically, Alpine are the banter club of Formula One right now. So guys, before we get to the dick of the day, excuse me, I wanna quickly mention McLaren, my team, because for me this weekend was a mixed bag for McLaren, because on one side, compared to last season, where we scored absolutely fuck all, this season, I mean, last weekend's race, we actually got a couple of points. We finished in 6th and 8th, but at the same time, for a team that has finished on the right foot and we're on the trajectory since from the last race of the season of last season. A bit disappointing, I would say, because I expected them to be at least in that top 5 maybe, but I think, to be honest, I'm going back to Andreas' comments that there are parts of the car that are still not 100%. That goes a bit full circle, because the car still lacks a little bit in some components compared to Red Bull, Ferrari, and he would say Mercedes as well. But listen, I'm not to say I'm gonna argue. There's not a lot to argue about McLaren. The fact that we got into Q3, we got ourselves into the points. And since this is only the first race of the season, then there's still a long way to go to battle ourselves to get into that top 3 mix, I would say right now. But it was okay for McLaren. I think it was a solid start. A bit disappointing that we could only manage to get 6 and 8. Oscar in particular looked a little bit off the pace compared to unlike Lando, unlike Lando this in Bahrain. There were a couple of instances where he was, for example, in qualifying, he was risking a little bit to get knocked out. But even in the race, quiet race for his standards, and he really didn't do much. I mean, an 8th place finish was the highest that he can that he could have accomplished. The dick of the day. Now, listen, there are two, for me, when it comes to the dick of the day, there are two opponents here. The one's a driver, and the second's a team. The team is Ferrari, because, I mean, to be fair, it was one of the very few highlights of this week of last Saturday, because Sainz and Leclerc were battling it out in a couple of laps together. I mean, they in fact, they almost collided in one point as well. So they were battling out together, not really obeying a lot of team orders, because when it comes to that aspect, normally the first driver just lets the other lets the other go through. But in the case of Ferrari, that wasn't the case. They were battling out together, and they could have easily, and they ended up on the rubble basically. So, but at least for Ferrari fans, they're relief. I think relief, and they're also thankful that both cars didn't end up colliding with each other. But a bit of an unsportsmanlike behavior, but a bit of an unsportsmanlike behavior. But at the same time, they provided literally the only real highlight of the entire race, because my God, this race was so boring, man. I mean, literally a procession. This race was. It also didn't help that one of the new regulations this year is that the DRS can be enabled from lap 2 onwards, and that really Max just took complete advantage of that, and basically just it makes a difference to the drivers as well. It's not just Max, but also the rest of the field as well. I mean, Perez used that DRS advantage to full use, getting from 5th to 2nd, but. Anyways, let's just not go out. Let's just not go out of point from there. But yeah, Ferrari, despite bringing one of the very few highlights of this weekend, battling out the two battling out each other. But I mean, if they could have ended up, if they could have collided with each other, it would have been very unsportsmanlike behavior, unsportsmanship from the sides from their side as well. However, the dick of the day has to go to Yuki Tsunoda, and also it's not just that, but also the clown of the day. For me, the clown of the day and the dick of the day has to go to Yuki Tsunoda, who drives for Racing Bulls. Because let's start basically with the funniest moment. So basically, towards the end, the team basically informed Yuki that to swap places with Ricciardo, because basically Ricciardo was on fresher tires. But Yuki didn't take this lightly, because as per typical Tsunoda, he really was pissed off by it. He was like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Are you serious?" And he caused a really massive tantrum, to be honest. And then towards, I mean, I believe it was after the race that Yuki got very close to Ricciardo. I mean, showing massive signs of frustration from his end, and even Ricciardo himself wasn't too pleased with Yuki's antics, and that really just that gives us another hint as well about the relationship between the two drivers, Tsunoda and Ricciardo, basically. And for me, really poor behavior from Yuki. I mean, listen, these things happen in the sport. So when obviously the team tells you to swap places for the better good of the race, for the better good of the strategy of the race, then you need to listen. Because I mean, if Racing Bulls, the fact that firstly, this was damaging for Yuki, not just for Yuki, but also for the team as well. I mean, they because just like Haas and just like Williams and even Alpine, no points scored for them, and maybe the score. I mean, for them, to be fair, the strategy was poor from Racing Bulls, but listen, if the team tells you to swap places, then you have to do that, because you need to obey team more. You need to listen to team more. I'm trying to think about anything else to add regarding this race, but really, there really wasn't much to add about this race overall. So just to give a short summary of the race overall is that very boring race, very uneventful race. I mean, a continuation of last season, with Max continuing his ruthless pace and basically just confirming yet again that he's the best driver at the planet right now, making every single rival and driver look silly, look silly. And for Red Bull, the perfect start to their title defense, both in their drivers and in their constructors, getting a 1-2. Max first, Checo second. Max winning the race by 22.45 seconds, insane. for insane for him and for the team. Sainz and the two Ferraris finishing third and fourth with Sainz and Leclerc. Sainz strong race for him and Leclerc. Also, I need to point this out as well. After the race, just shortly before the ceremony, not a single engineer just came to congratulate Carlos, and I felt really bad for Carlos. I mean, come on, man. I mean, third place. I mean, congratulate the driver. Congratulate him at least. Yeah, yes, he's leaving at the end of the season, but come on, man. He's still part of the team. Make him part of that team as well. Just don't leave him stranding. Just don't leave him shit-faced, basically. But yeah, anyway, Sainz third, Leclerc fourth. By the way, guys, apologies for the small mistake I've had with Leclerc and Russell. Basically, Leclerc was in fourth and Russell was in fifth. Bear with me, obviously, because I'm not 100% today, so I might not be operating at my best shape today. So apologies for that. So Leclerc fourth, despite his brake issues, still a good result for him. But comparing obviously to his pace in qualifying, disappointing race for him overall. Very frustrating from his regard. Russell in fifth, followed by Lando Norris in sixth, Hamilton in seventh, Piastri in eighth. And the Aston Martins completing the top 10 with Alonso and Stroll. Now, going back to Mercedes, a bit of an underwhelming race for them again, considering George getting a third place to only manage fifth. I mean, a realistic outcome. A realistic outcome for him, because obviously the Red Bull and the Ferrari are better, have the better edge over Mercedes. So realistic outcome for George, but yeah, fifth and seventh for a team that is hoping for a better season than the last two they've had, doesn't go down well with the team. Lando sixth place, best for me, the best he could have managed, considering considering those above him are just better. And Aston Martin, obviously compared to last season, worse. I mean, also got a podium last season and to just get 9th and 10th, doesn't just not the best of starts. But listen, still points for them, 3 points. So better than nothing, I guess. Those who finished outside the top 10 and not getting a single point, Zhou Guanyu in 11th, considering starting literally in the last 4 places of the grid in 17th or 16th, if I'm not mistaken. Decent race for him. Kevin Magnussen, as mentioned before, solid race for him. For Haas in 12th. The two Racing Bulls in 13 and 14, not a great result for them, considering that they were on the front foot in free practice. It was a very frustrating weekend for Racing Bulls, not a way to start your season. Didn't mention this team, but Williams had a really poor race this weekend as well, with Alex Albon in 15th and Logan Sargent down in last. Not a really difficult race for Williams overall. Hulkenberg in 16th, Alpine 17th and 18th, stinking down the table there. Bottas had a race to forget, also in 19th, and Logan Sargent basically finishing up the grid in 20. No retirements, as I mentioned before. Max not only won the race, but he also got the fastest lap with a 1 minute and 32.608 seconds, and thus getting the driver of the day. My choice would have gone with Carlos Sainz. He had a strong weekend overall, and that third place just caps it off, in my opinion, at Jeddah. And speaking of Jeddah, next Saturday as well, similar to Bahrain, this will be the second race that will take place on a Saturday and not on a Sunday because of Ramadan in that country. So the same outcome is going to take place. Thursday practice, Friday qualifying, and Saturday is the race. And let's hope that we have a much better race than what we had in Bahrain, because that was a really boring race, making Red Bull making every rival look stupid and bad. And that's just not what we want for the season. We want close racing. We want a close championship, tight racing from opening to end, and that's just not the way. That's just not the way to get things going for the new season. All right, guys, that's pretty much it for Bahrain. Gave you my thoughts on that. Might ask Malcolm for next week's episode, for the next episode, to give his quick thoughts on that, which basically, I mean, is going to be pretty much repetition of what I said. So the one last thing I'm going to be talking about for this episode is my thoughts on Drive to Survive, as I mentioned in the beginning of this episode. Now, managed to watch it for all 10 episodes on Netflix, and listen, in all honesty, I mean, listen, it's a nice show, Drive to Survive. I mean, it gives you that behind the scenes look of every single team, and even with the drivers that take the spotlight. So it's a fascinating approach on the sport. It's clearly got a lot of fans into the sport as well. I mean, Netflix are responsible for this, so you're talking about a very well respected and a highly regarded streaming company around the world. But I mean, basically, the sixth season was a recap of last season. I'm not gonna go too in depth on it because me and Malcolm already gave us our thoughts on the last season. So if you want to listen to our thoughts on that on the previous season, guys, make sure to watch the first episode, available on Spotify and YouTube, and both on Spotify and YouTube. So make sure to give that a listen. I mean, since we've had dominant season where Red Bull won every single race, I mean, Netflix tried to make the episodes interesting. I mean, try to give each perspective on the different teams. Basically, it touched every single team, if I'm not mistaken, bar Sauber, Alfa Romeo, which they were Alfa Romeo last season. So I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't they didn't have an entire episode just dedicated to Alfa Romeo. But I mean, overall, it's not bad. However, towards the end, I was getting a little bit. It got quite repetitive towards the end. It was getting a bit tiresome as well. And the formula, no pun intended, by the way, it was just exactly the fucking same every single episode. And there were a couple of episodes that I was genuinely bored because some episodes focused on teams that unfortunately they don't get enough recognition, unlike, for example, Ferrari or the big teams like Ferrari and Red Bull. And the fact that they dramatize things, for example, with rivalries that on paper they look dramatic, but in reality they're not actually rivalries, and towards in reality. So unfortunately, yeah, a bit underwhelmed by it. I mean, look, if you've watched previous seasons of Drive to Survive, this is exactly what you're expecting it to be, basically. I mean, more storylines regarding what happened in the season. The one storyline I was very, very disappointed, ruled out of, but the fact that how they treated the whole scenario of how Carlos Sainz won at Singapore. It's like they've made they didn't hold the event as significant. Basically, it was just like, okay, Carlos won a race, just another day in the office. Basically, I mean, people just don't realize that this was a monumental win for Ferrari and Sainz. I mean, we're talking about a team that literally stopped Red Bull from a perfect season. So I really thought that they were going to give this episode, they were going to give this thing of high significance, and unfortunately it wasn't the case. Really, really upset by that. And yeah, I mean, not really anything to add regarding, not much else to add regarding Drive to Survive on my thoughts on that. It's all right. If you want to, if you want to just waste an hour watching Netflix and watching some episodes, then this show is perfect because I mean it flies by in a flash. And but unfortunately, yeah, regarding myself, because I'm a massive fan of the sport, and considering I've watched every season of the show, it's all right, but nothing to write home about. It seems that this is going to keep going on for the rest of the season. So I'm not expecting anything. I'm not expecting anything new regarding this. But it's good. a bit underwhelming with how some certain storylines were treated and implemented, but it's always nice to get a behind the scenes look at each team and every single driver as well. Just to get a bit more behind the scenes as well, even also a couple of behind the scenes at what they do outside the sport as well. And one last thing I want to mention is it was so nice to see Gunther Steiner reuniting again with Mattia Binotto. That for me, just I really want to see like a spin-off of him and Binotto just hanging around in Italy, basically, just a bit of a spin-off show. So I'm hoping that they can consider that, because it can strike very, very well with the fans and with everyone as well. So overall, it's all right. The sixth season of Drive to Survive is fine. It's serviceable at best. However, don't expect anything groundbreaking or grandiose. It's exactly the same as last season's. So don't expect anything new with this brand new season of Drive to Survive. And that brings us to the end of this episode, guys. Now, firstly, for those who are listening, thank you so much for the patience regarding obviously Michael not being available, and also myself since I've been sick. And I'm to be honest, I am still a little bit sick, but I'm slowly getting back to full shape and full recovery. Basically, just had a really had the common cold, and it got to me a bit. Yes, it got to me quite badly yesterday, but today I'm starting to get a little bit better, recovering slowly, so I can get back to full shape for the rest of the week. So thanks for the patience, guys. Really appreciate it. And our next episode, if obviously nothing serious happens, unlike this week, is going to be between Sunday and Monday, where me and Malcolm will be giving our thoughts on the Jeddah Grand Prix, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Same rules, same scenario is going to follow, basically. Giving our thoughts on the race, on qualifying practice, how it all went through, how it all basically unfolded, giving our awards, driver of the day, those categories that I've mentioned in this episode. And if there are a couple of news that has hit the scene, has hit the F1 scene, we rest assured that we are going to cover that. Thanks so much, guys, for listening, and I hope to see you for the next episode. And with that, take care of yourselves, have a great week, and see you later.